The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I have 11 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and get started with our Monday morning briefing, which will cover the weather through the rest of the week into the weekend. So this is Sam at the National Weather Service in Wakefield. So in terms of our weather highlights this week, the main focus today into this evening will be there's some potential for strong to severe thunderstorms, mainly across the northern portions of the area. That would be this evening. This is well ahead of a cold front. The actual cold front does not cross until tomorrow, but the primary threats with any storms that would move through later this evening into tonight would be damaging winds, but we can't rule out some large hail also. I'll get more into the storm potential in a few slides, but yeah, again, the cold front will cross the area this on Tuesday, and then with that front crossing the area, we could have some gusty westerly winds up to 30 to 35, perhaps up to 40 miles per hour for the northern portions of the area. And then we could also have a isolated shower or two along the front as well, but it looks a lot drier than this evening and tonight. So, and then behind that front, we will turn cooler for tomorrow and Wednesday with the cooler and drier air, but we will return to above normal temperatures, first into the 70s Thursday and Friday, and then likely into the 80s by the weekend. And then we also stay dry through at least Friday. Low wind chances for showers perhaps return into the weekend, but does not look like a washout by any means. In terms of the marine side of things, we are expecting sub-advisory conditions through tonight. But again, with that front approaching, the westerly winds do pick up and could have a few gusts to 30 knots tomorrow into tomorrow night. And then gradually just diminishing winds into the middle and latter half of the week. So again, in terms of the weather pattern, we will warm up quite nicely today with this warm front lifting north, and then this kind of sequence of images doesn't quite capture what happens tonight, but we have this front over the Ohio Valley today, and then well ahead of that, some showers and storms push ahead through the Appalachians and then perhaps into the northern portions of our area. And then that front does cross the area tomorrow, and then that will leave mainly dry weather Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and likely for most of the weekend. But high pressure of some sort remaining near the area. In terms of that severe weather threat, this has been increased a bit compared to the overnight forecast, where the level 1 risk has been pulled a little bit south and a little bit east, and then as well as that level 2 out of 5 threat, which now extends southeastward into the northwestern portions of the Richmond metro. In terms of timing for any potential severe weather, that would be mainly this evening, so rather late, so 8 p.m. to around midnight. And then so the greatest threat would be across the far northwest portions of the area. And then in terms of what we expect from any of those storms, it would be primarily damaging wind gusts. Those would be in excess of 60 miles per hour possible. And then the environment is also favorable for some hail, so we can't rule out some larger hail as well. I should stress that this is quite an uncertain forecast because we don't exactly know how far east these storms will get. And then, there's also the potential that the majority of the storms stay north of the area. So either way, as I said before, the highest, the area we're most focused on is mainly from Richmond and points north and west. So Here's a timing graphic that perhaps breaks this down a little easier to understand when we would expect any storms. So you know, beginning around 8 p.m. across the far west, far northwest, and then shifting eastward through the evening. Um, Once we get to this yellow area, from the northern neck, middle peninsula onto the eastern shore, uh, we kind of expect the threat of severe weather in that area to be quite low, since it's quite late at night. We lose the daytime heating, and then we also overall the environment isn't as favorable closer to the bay here with the cooler water temperatures. But so really, it's this area in blue, really the northern part of this area in blue that we're most focused on, and then that perhaps sneaks into the green areas, in that 9 to 11, and then I think by midnight, any threat will be ending from west to east. So, and then further south of this line, the overall threat for storms is very low. In terms of rainfall potential, these storms will be moving quite fast, so really don't expect a ton of rain from them. But as with any storm, could get maybe a half inch, maybe a little more in the heaviest storm cores. But other than that, it doesn't look like a heavy rainfall threat at this time. And then in terms of the broader rainfall forecast, again, majority of the rainfalls this evening and tonight, which is captured in this Monday to Wednesday timeframe, and then beyond that, into the week, into the weekend, any sort of significant or measurable precipitation appears quite low. So be quite dry after tomorrow. Again, with that front moving through tomorrow afternoon, there could again be an isolated shower or two. And then I did also mention this. There is some gusty winds likely along and behind that front tomorrow. So we could have some. This is the max wind gust over the next 3 days, which is going to be for tomorrow afternoon. So overall gusts 30 to 35 miles per hour. A couple areas could see 35 to 40. It's most likely, from the Richmond metro eastward onto the eastern shore. And then, this timing graphic here on the right kind of shows that. So it's mainly in the afternoon for those gusty winds. They do drop off some tomorrow night, but they do stay up a bit. So still could have 10, 20 mile an hour gusts overnight. And then into Wednesday afternoon, it won't be quite as windy, but still could have a few gusts up to 30 miles per hour out of the west or northwest. And then looking at the temperature forecast ahead for this week, we are quite warm today. Could have temperatures likely in the upper 70s, mid to upper 70s, to around 80. Likely stay in the upper 60s on the eastern shore, but again, other than that, most areas in the 70s to around 80. And we do cool off with that front moving through tomorrow. That'll be, especially apparent on Wednesday when, we'll be in the 50s to mid 60s. And then we do moderate into Thursday, back into the mid to upper 60s. And then by the weekend, Friday into the weekend, 70s. And then at this time, Saturday looks like the warmest day with low to mid 80s for most of the area. And our overnight temperatures kind of stay rather close to normal, mainly in the 40s and 50s for lows, except on Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Could have a few spots that drop into the mid to upper 30s. So we'll keep an eye on that, but doesn't look like any widespread frost or freeze potential Wednesday night. And then, those lows moderate again as we warm up into the weekend. In terms of the rainfall forecast, chance of rain, again, the showers and storms would be mainly after 6 p.m. this evening for north and northwest portions of the area. lingering into, that midnight hour perhaps. And then with the actual front crossing tomorrow afternoon, in the late morning to early afternoon, there's a 10 to 30% chance of a isolated shower tomorrow afternoon. And then we do turn completely dry Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then as I mentioned earlier, doesn't look like widespread rainfall for the weekend, but could be a shower or two around as well. So low end chances 20 to 30%, Saturday afternoon into early Sunday. Shifting to the marine side of things, again with that front moving through, we do have the gusty westerly winds tomorrow, so there's very high likelihood of small craft conditions for most of the waters across the bay, ocean, and rivers. While it will be quite gusty over land, the higher end potential over the water is 30 to perhaps 35 knots, but the potential for widespread gusts of greater than 34 knots, those gale conditions, that's looking very unlikely. And then, so we do have small craft advisories actually in effect today, just for those gusty winds in the lower bay and in the lower James River. And then for tomorrow into Wednesday, again, those more widespread small craft advisory conditions. And then we do, calm down for later Wednesday into Thursday. And then perhaps by Friday, there's another chance of some higher winds for most of the marine area. And then in terms of maximum wind gusts, mainly 25 to 30 knots. There could be a few isolated gusts, as I said before, 30 to 35 knots. And that would be mainly focused in the tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow night, and then the first part of Wednesday. And then I will just leave this here for a second. And then in terms of the wave heights, generally 2 to 3 feet in the bay, mainly perhaps some 4-foot waves at the mouth of the bay and in the lower bay, with 3 to 4 foot seas offshore. And then in terms of the weather ahead for next week, so we'll kind of be shifting away from our near to below normal temperatures back to a warmer pattern. So we are favoring above normal temperatures next week, as well as slightly above normal precipitation. Yeah, and then other than that, I'll just leave these highlights back up here, which were repeated from the first slide, but that's all I have. So I'll take any questions if there are any.